Hi everyone, today I'm going to try and show you how to make an elf hat. So it's been requested by my lovely friend Tina over at Tina's Reborns and More that I show how I made my Torrida's hat. This is my little nursery nanny elf or nursery nanny fairy, and she's called Torrida, and I made her this hat because she's a little bald elf. And yeah, she was getting a bit nippy, weren't you, Torrida? So I made her this hat. And I also have a tutorial on how I made her shoes. Here's a little elf shoes that I made her to keep her little touches warm. And Tina has actually made some of those. So yeah, it must be it must be an okay tutorial to follow because Tina's followed it and she's made some lovely elf shoes. So let's take the hat off that I've made Torrida. You'll see that it fastens around her ears, and I've got some little, these are the cam snaps, but you could use Velcro or you could use press studs, a button, or you could just leave her hat so that it dangles down at the front like that. I've seen them like that before. Or you could fasten it under a chin like that. It's entirely up to you. I like it like that because it stays on properly and looks better on. So I'm just going to show you how to make the basic hat, and you can decorate it as you will. I've put some braid on mine. I've popped it round the curl and then back again so that there's this double row of pom-poms on the back. I've put some little floral trim around the edge here, and I put some lace, just tucked it under the edge because she doesn't have any hair. And then I've stuffed the curled part of my hat with some wadding so that it stays stiff and stays upright. So what I used to make my pattern was this. This is a little piece of packing foam, I think you could call it. I got something from Amazon that was wrapped in it, and I thought, oh, that'll be perfect because it's flexible and soft, but it's strong enough not to tear when you're using it. So make sure your piece of foam is big enough for the size of hat you want to make. So if you're having one with a curl on the top, it needs to be tall enough to add your curl, and it needs to be wide enough to come from your elf's back of her head to the front of her head. You can always trim it down afterwards, but so we'll start, get it to the where you want it to come down to at the back of her head. Because I'm using felt, we don't need any it won't need any finishing off. The felt won't. We won't need to zigzag it or anything like that. But if you're using a fabric that needs finishing off, add a little bit extra on these outside edges so that you can turn them over. So from the middle of her head, I went round to the back of her ear and just shaped this around her ear like this. We're actually going to make half a hat. We're going to cut out the pattern for half a hat and then we'll double it to make the full hat. So for the back of her ear, I drew from the bottom of her ear there like this. Careful not to get pen on your doll though. And round to the top. Just draw your shape like so. And then where you've drawn, you can see that where it's curled, look. Just cut it around like this. This is the bit that's going to go around her ear. And we can put that back on. This is the back, remember, I've gone a little bit further across there than the middle because we're going to need a seam there. And if you don't allow for the seam, it'll be too tight on her. Then we come to the front of the hat like this. And I'm going to cut off that whole bit. I'm just going to cut straight down there. You can draw it first if you want to. Draw where you're going to cut and cut straight down like so. So I'm going to cut straight up here like this and around the curve. I hope you can see what I'm doing. So now we've got the size of our hat. If you want to change the length of it, you can do. I'm going to cut mine a little bit shorter, I think. Then we need to decide what pattern we want for the front of our hat. So I'm going to just cut my fabric to the right width for the size of the hat that I want. So I need to be going just in front of that tear there that's in my fabric. I'm just going to cut straight up here like this. So here we are, that fits around her ear like that. And then the idea is you can either fasten it under her chin or you can bring it round and fasten it there like that. So that, I would say that's about the right length that we want it. It does come over her face too far, but we can alter that. So what we need to do is decide what shape you want the top of your hat. So if you want the top of your hat, just a plain little hat, measure to the middle of her head like this, look. Draw where you want it to come to, and then just cut it. So measure to the middle of her head, and make sure you leave a bit extra for the seam. Shape that in a curve like her head's shaped, and trim that. Or if you want it to have a curve like mine's got, let me see if I can get a bit better pen. The one I've got's not working very well. So this is her ear. You can measure it like this. So we know that that's long enough. I'm happy with that. It comes far enough around there so that I've got a seam. I want it to come to here to close. So just past the middle of her head. So I'm going to go with that. So just here I'm going to cut from here, and I'm going to cut down so that it's around her head. You see, and then down here, and this will narrow off the little front strip that you've got there. That's fine. We'll narrow that off. So, and then we need to stitch it, yeah, to around there. And then this bit here, if you want it to be a plain hat, go around. Remember that you need to come to here so it'll join, and join that up like that. And that'll be just a plain little bonnet. So just draw. Make sure you leave your seam allowance, draw around there. And if you want to do a curved bit on your hat, decide where you want your curve to come to, and literally just draw in a point. Bear in mind that it will be smaller because of your seam allowance, so make it quite big, I would. And then, so if we do it like this, you can see where that's the top of Torrida's head. Then this is going to come down the front part of her head here, and then this is the back part. So we're not going to do any cutting or sewing here. We're going to curve this around here like this, and remember, as I said, you need to make it thicker than you want, because once you stitch it, it will go smaller. So that basically is the pattern. So let's cut that out. Cut it out of you can do it with paper, you can do it with a piece of white fabric, anything you've got that's, that's handy. I'm going to use felt, as I said, for my hat. So let's try that on our head again, just to be sure. You can always tape little bits of paper on if you've cut too much off, or, you know, don't worry about it. Worrying about it's only going to make it more difficult. So yeah, I think that's going to be fine. We've got the seam allowance there, we've got the curve there at the top that we're going to have, and we've got the seam enough of the seam allowance at the back. So then what you need to do is lay it onto your fabric. Here's my fabric, and if you feel you haven't got enough of a seam allowance, just add a bit more of a seam allowance. You can always take it in if you've got too much. You can't do anything with it if you've made it too small. So here's one that I've made already. I'll show you. I personally, I think it's quite it's quite fiddly to do, but it's not, if you see what I mean. Let me show you. Let's see. Let's get this. So this is the shape you should have, and you should have 2 of these shapes. So lay your, look at that, it's nearly the exact same size, isn't it? Lay your pattern on your fabric, cut it out. If you're not sure you've got enough of a seam allowance, cut it out a bit bigger around here. This will make your curved bit bigger. Look here, look, this is going to be too narrow when I've done, so I need to cut it out there instead. So if you've done that and made it too narrow, just tape a bit of extra paper or whatever you're using in there, look. Tape that on and then cut it out on your fabric. Like I say, if you're worried you haven't got enough seam allowance, which I haven't on here, look, cut it wider here when you cut it out. Just cut it wider around here. So when you've got your 2 pieces cut out, put them right sides together, and you need to stitch from the back of the head up and over your curve, and then round again and round to the front of the head. That's all the stitching you need to do. I trimmed mine with pinking shears so that the curve wouldn't be too tight to curve, if you see what I mean. I also, when I did Torrida's hat, I cut hers out with pinking shears too, so that it gave it a bit of a pattern. So once you've done your stitching, stitch around here, and then back and over the top. Turn it the right way out. And as I say, make sure you've got enough of a seam allowance. This one was a little bit, this is one that I made for Torrida that was a little bit too small. So the seam allowance I've put on there wasn't big enough. I'll show you it on her though. Make sure you add more seam allowance. It's easier to trim it down than it is to add extra seam on. I'm just poking my point through. But I'm actually going to be using this hat for someone else, so it worked out okay. And this is what you should end up with. And then I'm going to try that on Torrida. Like I say, this one was a bit too small for her. I made her another one. And then we'll pull that down the back there. We'll add our fastening just here, just on the end of the, just on the back at the bottom, just here. And we'll add it onto the end of the strap at the front. So there's our little strap. We need the fastener to go through there. So either use press studs, Velcro, you can even stitch it because it will come off. Once it's fastened onto there, it will come off quite easily and go back on again. Then you need to stuff your, I mean, you might not have done this curved bit. If you haven't done the curved bit, it'll just be like a helmet, won't it? you just sort of sewn around there. You would just have sewn around like that so that there's no curly bit. Stuff your curly bit with some soft wadding and then decorate to your taste. So you could put little flowers on it, you could put buttons on it, you could put leaves on it, little mushrooms, anything you want. Go mad. And as I say, I made the edge of mine decorative by cutting it with pinking shears. Come on, Torrida, show everyone this hat. And then, yeah, and then once you've decorated it, just pop your fasteners closed. And there she is with her hat on. Right, I hope that is helpful to someone. I hope I haven't made a pig's ear of that. I hope you understood what I was doing. If you've got any questions, just pop me a message and I'll try and help. Yeah, so I'm going to be using this for someone else because it was a little bit too small for Torrida, but yeah. I hope that was helpful to someone. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.